What was the reasons for the shortage of blood? I know it's of course needing more blood. Was it the pandemic that stirred things? Is it multifactorial where the processes aren't as efficient? We have to create better systems. What were the reasons for a shortage that we're currently experiencing? Because working in healthcare, we knew about this where we had to be very specific about who to give blood to. We only could give it if it was seven below. Even with like the ECMO devices during the pandemic, there was like studies that found that hemoglobin above 10 was mostly efficient, but we had to pick and choose and be selective of who we give blood to as the highest probability of making it alive because we had such shortages.
So the main reason why there was a shortage, it started in 2020 with the pandemic. And the blood centers across the United States, they typically go out on mobiles to collect whole blood, and then they have their fixed sites to collect their platelets. Sometimes they'll take their platelet devices out and collect on mobiles as well. All mobiles were shut down during the pandemic. And that put a huge lack of collection because there were no mobiles. In the blood centers, in the fixed sites, you could only come in and donate by appointment only because of the risk of COVID. And people just stopped coming in because they stayed home. We all stayed home. During the first 3 months of COVID, my team usually had a in-person training of roughly 70%. We were all in-person training at a hospital or a blood center. During COVID, that went up to 85% virtual. So we were not in blood centers. The blood centers were shutting down. The hospitals were closing. You guys working in the hospital should know, you weren't allowing family members to visit during COVID. Everything just shut down, and that put a big strain on the blood supply. We had launched version 7 um, before COVID hit. So they had the capability, they just didn't have the donors.
And I'm curious, since Teramo does some R&D, research and development, were y'all doing any kind of monoclonal antibody work or anything like that during this time period?
So not monoclonal work, but we actually were involved in securing an emergency use application from the FDA for a column that we partnered with. It was called a marker column. And what this column was it actually absorbed cytokines. So what we did was we worked with the marker company. This column actually connects into our therapeutic device called Opdia. And so what happens is with these therapy is we would pump whole blood into the Opdia machine, separate out the plasma from the red cells. We would return the red cells to the patient, but then we would pump the plasma through this immunoabsorption column. It would absorb the cytokines. And what it was used for was to treat patients in cytokine storm in ICU. So the patients really unwell on the ECMO machines were the patients we really targeted throughout this study. And so we were very busy getting eight centres up and running, ICU centres up and running during COVID. And that's how we contributed to some of the innovation during COVID as a company.